Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She's the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Today is January 15th, 2025. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I'll be your host. You can send your questions and comments to Helga via email at questions@schillerinstitute.org, or you can post them in the chat page. So Helga, you made a statement on Monday where you said that in 2025, we will see the end of the old system, the end of a unipolar order enforced by the military power of the US and NATO. But you also said that things could go really wrong in crisis hotspots, as the neoliberal oligarchy will not surrender. The key to moving into a new paradigm, you have insisted, is a rejection of geopolitics. This seems to have hit some of our academic viewers right in the face. So let's start with a question about geopolitics. Actually, two questions. From an American podcaster, he asked, "Don't you think the geopolitical worldview is too dominant among Western leaders to break with it?" And he said it's entrenched in the political thinking in both political parties in the United States, including among many Republicans who are supporting Trump. And the second question was from a professor in the UK, and he asks, "Isn't geopolitics based on the idea that since there is no agreement on what defines a commonwealth or a general welfare, that therefore the identity divides used to foster geopolitical divisions are natural and cannot be overcome?"
Well, I think if geopolitics would be natural, we would be part of the animal species. I mean, everybody knows that male animals mark their domain by certain methods and make sure that there's no competitor. But we are not animals, we are human beings. And, I take a look at it from the long arc of development. If you think, how old is the universe? We don't know exactly, but maybe 13.5 billion years. That was the James Webb telescope findings. And in this long period, the human history is maybe 2 million years, and the recorded history is maybe at most 10,000 years, depending which artifacts you take as an account. So we are only around for a very short time in the history of the universe. But then think 10,000 years ago, or 20,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, where were we? And where are we today? We have increased the population potential from a few hundred thousands, maybe maximum a few million people, because before we were really developing agriculture and were on the level of hunters and gatherers. The population density of the planet was very little, and at that time probably people used a stone to hit their neighbor, and it was regarded as a murderous weapon. Today you look at the same stone and you say, "Oh, that's interesting, these are rare earths," or "This is a a cell phone of the same size." And in that cell phone, or in that uh, ability to use the rare earths for production, you have the embodiment of all the scientific and technological development of that entire period. Now, 10,000 years is a very short period of time, and you can think, 10,000 years from now, we probably have made leaps and moves forward much, much bigger than what we have done in the past. So do you really think that we will be still, if we don't extinct ourselves in a nuclear war in the meantime, which could happen naturally, do you think in 10,000 years we still will be, struggling over pieces of territory and wealth and so forth, when we for sure have long colonized nearby space? We have, made villages on the moon. We probably have, even Elon Musk is excited about this perspective. We probably have built cities on Mars. do you really think that it is the nature of human beings to be in a geopolitical fight? I don't think so. I think we are different from all other species by our power of reason, by that we can change whatever is limiting us, and eventually it will be clear that we are the one human species which will have a important task to survive in the galaxy. And I think the latest count of the James Webb telescope is at least we have several trillion galaxies. Now that is mind-boggling, but if we are supposed to survive as a species in this incredibly large universe, we have to change our mode of behavior, and we cannot spend the energy to fight against each other. So that's my answer to the professor from UK. And I agree, the geopolitical view is prevalent. If you look at the top of the system, the two political parties in the United States, the EU bureaucracy, which thinks that we have now to become a own geopolitical force against other great powers like China, Russia, and the United States. But if you ask the people, if you ask the population, I don't think that they're thinking geopolitically. I think people tend to be immediately friends with other people when they get to know them. On the lowest level, they cook together, they dance together. If it's a little bit more developed, they start to appreciate their different cultures. So I think that, the idea that the geopolitical outlook, which has the seed of world wars in it, geopolitics was the reason why we had 2 world wars in the 20th century. I think this is definitely something which needs to be overcome, and it must be superseded by the idea that there is a larger interest which unites us as the one humanity. And I think this is an existential question, because if we cannot overcome it, the likelihood that we will blow ourselves up and destroy everything on this planet, unfortunately, we have never been closer to that. But on the other side, I think that if enough people realize that this danger exists, maybe we can mobilize the moral fiber to overcome it.
We're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder of the Schiller Institute, and also the instigator of the International Peace Coalition, which is going to be meeting again this Friday, as it is every Friday for now, I think, 84 weeks. Now, there's a sort of follow-up question to that first one, Helga, from Pat Moulton, who asks, it would seem to be crucial for a transition of power in the United States to be fairly quick, approving cabinet choices to grasp the reins. What kind of strategies do you think will be used to stop this? And would it be the military that would be involved?
Well, I think it's very much in flux, I think the key question is really, does Trump have a strategy to put his own policy and control the diversified elements of the appointments he has made? If you look at many of the aspects, people are extremely worried that there are too many war hawks in the positions, and or too many monetarists who would like to go for an orgy of deregulation, people who have all kinds of things. But I think that, and I think I'm not only hoping, but we have an idea what to do. That that Trump has said various things which in part are contradictory, but he has said he wants to end the wars. He thinks the endless wars were devastating to American interest. He has said he wants to meet both President Putin, President Xi Jinping fairly soon. He has said that if the United States and China work together, there is no problem they cannot solve. So there are several reasons to think that he indeed will want to make a different policy. And I also would tend to think that he has learned the hard lesson from his first administration, for example, by the appointment of such people as Tulsi Gabbard and Kesh Patel, one hopes. On the other side, he has made statements which are hair-raising to many people who believe in sovereignty, such as, that he wants to take Greenland either, by free will or militarily, which is, hair-raising. He wants to reintegrate the Panama Canal into American control, which is also exactly not, the respect for sovereignty. He wants to, he has all kinds of things which, are going in a different direction. So rather than looking at that as the rabbit on the snake, or, waiting on the fence like a sparrow where, watching where things go, I have a different perspective. And that is that, I believe in the bottom of my heart that we only will overcome the war danger forever if we find a way of collaborating between the countries of the so-called collective West with those countries of the global South who are trying to shed 500 years of colonialism. And I think it's much underestimated in the West, both in the United States and also in Europe, at least in some European countries, that the determination of the countries of Africa, of Latin America, and Asia to overcome slavery, to overcome, slavery in its modern forms by not having access to credit for development, by being forced by the trade terms to sell raw materials, without really being able to use those in their own countries. There is a tremendous spirit. This year we will have the 17th anniversary of the Bandung Conference, and the spirit of Bandung has woken up in a very powerful way. And despite massive efforts by certain financial interests to destabilize these aspirations, I think the fact that the BRICS are becoming stronger, that Indonesia joined the BRICS, that the countries of Africa are definitely determined to overcome poverty and development with the help of the BRICS. I think that is something which is not, the only way how you can destroy that is by nuclear war. But nuclear war has no winners. So, whoever thinks of curbing that is also thinking about his own funeral. So that's not an option to contemplate about. If, on the other side, we would really convince the people in the United States and the people in Western Europe to just say, look, the world has changed already. The unipolar world no longer exists. We already have a developing multipolar world. And why not, really go back to the best traditions of American policy in terms of foreign policy, John Quincy Adams, to cooperate with a system of sovereign countries around the world. And, in Europe, it would be the tradition of de Gaulle or Adenauer or, Rathenau, Enrico Mattei, tendencies where people had the idea that, we are not imperialists, but we have to find a cooperative way of working with the countries of the global South, who have now become the much more prominent force in the world. If we do that, I think it would be so easy to solve all the problems, because, what do we gain? I mean, the only people who gain by wars is the military-industrial complex and the irresponsible people who have invested in these firms, owning stock which they think makes them richer. But what does it help them if the result of it is that the whole world is blown up? If we would go and say, let's revive our economies, let's rebuild the United States. The California fire should have given everybody an absolute warning message. The United States needs infrastructure. You need massive water development, water management. The North American water project, NAWAPA, should have been implemented decades ago, but let's now do it. And this way prevent future such catastrophes from happening. And there are so much constructive things to do that I think, if countries of the collective West really want to survive, we will go in this direction and we will try to put this objective and alternative more powerful on the agenda than ever before.
Well, and for those of you who are worried about what's going to happen with the confirmation hearings for the various nominees by President Trump, we put out a dossier called the Liars Bureau, which draws the attention, or trying to draw the attention of the Senate to the fact that the people who are opposing, especially Gabbard and Patel, are people who themselves are the ones responsible for the endless wars, the spying, the surveillance, and so on. So that's available through the LaRouche organization, the Liars Bureau. Now, Helga, you've actually answered several questions in what you just said. Someone asked, Trump, you say, is ready to meet with President Putin to end the war. What if the European countries continue to support Ukraine? As indicated by last week's Ramstein Air Base conference, what could Trump do to end the war? I think you just answered with the go to the global south and outflank them. But there are a couple of questions on Germany in specific that I want to give you. One is there any hope that Friedrich Merz, the Christian Democratic candidate for chancellor and a dedicated war hawk, can he be defeated? And secondly, is there support for the call from Sarah Wagenknecht's party to rebuild the Nord Stream pipeline?
Well, I think Merz, as of now, has said nothing which would convince me that he would be any better than the Streetlight Coalition, which is just going out. As a matter of fact, he is even worse in promoting the sending of the Taurus missile to the Ukrainians. Now, this is really, incredibly, because General Kujat, the former inspector of the German army and head of the NATO military committee, just made a very, very strong warning saying that whoever is promoting the sending of the Taurus is promoting that German soldiers should man this missile, because the Ukrainians are not trained to use it. So it would have to be delivered and used by German soldiers, which would make Germany immediately an active party of the war and therefore a target of an escalation in the tensions, with Russia, leading potentially to the destruction of all of Germany. Now, Kujat has said that in the strongest terms, because this obviously applies for Merz, it applies for Habeck, who for some strange reason thinks he can ever become Chancellor of Germany, which I think is a joke, given the fact that he successfully destroyed the German economy. And, why would anybody vote still for such a incapable person? What happens to the Merz vote, I think in large part depends on what Trump does. Trump clearly has a different policy for Ukraine. In Germany, unfortunately, the policy seems to be still dominated by the relicts of the Biden administration, of the British policy, of the EU policy. Ramstein, they divided the tasks which will be not taken care of by the United States into, I think, 8 groups or so, at two countries each. Are supposed to replace what the United States did before. There is still this unbelievable talk about making Germany war ready. This is Pistorius. He was just in Kiev. And, it seems, and they have now basically plans to make a home division, which is supposed to help to supply NATO troops in their move toward the Eastern Front. This is against the Constitution. And I can only, hope that there are enough people who should have a horror about the idea that Germany again would drive tanks against Russia. I mean, how history forgotten can you be? I mean, we had a Second World War where, even so Hitler was brought to power by many influential forces, including in the United States and Great Britain, naturally in Germany as well. But, the Germans did have an incredible guilt for the Second World War. I mean, there's no way you can talk yourself out of it. And in light of that history, then do what these people are doing now. I mean, I've said this, I think, even on this program before. I always thought that when it came to the German unification in 89, 90, that the Russians were incredibly generous by, allowing German unification, including Germany united joining NATO, with the provision, however, that there should be no expansion of NATO to the east, that there should be no foreign troops on the territory of the former GDR. Both things are massively violated with NATO expansions, and now with the new headquarters for the Baltic Sea in Rostock, which is again, is a violation of the 2+4 treaty. So I think that, in light of all of that, it is an absolute shame what these people who seem to be like, occupied by some alien spirit, trying to go the Drang nach Osten. It's almost like a repetition of that terrible sentiment of the 30s, 20s and 30s of territorial gains in the East. I think everybody in the EU would go bananas about the comparison, but if you really look at the substance of it, that's what it is. So I think that, the hope is that enough people wake up. Now, the CDU has gone down a little bit from 32. I think they are now around 30, 31 at most, and the AfD has gone up from 20 to 22. Now that's still a big gap of 9-10%, or 9%. But under dramatic conditions, and I'm not saying I want the AfD to win. I'm just saying any party who is against the war should be voted. And right now it's only the Büso, which is my party, which is very small, and we are in this fight not so much that we think we can win, but we are an extremely important producer of ideas, of solutions, and an election campaign is a very important medium to spread those. And unfortunately, the Wagenknecht party is losing in the polls. I think it has to do with the fact that the people don't like the fact that they have now made coalitions with other parties in the 3 East German states and made significant compromises. And a lot of people say, why should we vote them if they are becoming like just another party? And I think people are really very disappointed about Wagenknecht repeating all the time the unprovoked war of aggression when it comes to the Ukraine. And many people, especially in East Germany, just don't believe that NATO narrative because they have their own historic memory and they have been time witnesses. So it's not so easy to fool them. So I think, even if, Merz wins, which I really think he should not, because, he is for deregulation. He's a complete liberal in terms of economics. He even is against nuclear energy. He just ruled out the return to nuclear energy. So why would you vote somebody who clearly will not remedy the economy and who clearly is going to escalate the geostrategic conflict with Russia and China? So I can only say that he would be, under the circumstances, the worst choice. And even if he would win, look at what happened to Macron. Macron, is now the most hated man in France. Even the people who helped him to come to power are absolutely against him. and his government is extremely unstable, and there is no perspective of a stable government under present conditions for France, and that could happen to Merz as well. And you should also really look at the massive change of the European Union. You have now a whole, number of countries who are turning away from the EU. You have Slovakia, Hungary, then naturally the recent changes in Austria. Now you have the vote in Croatia, where the new or the person who is now voted in for the second time, Milanovic, he got 74.7%. That's 2/3 of the people. So you have Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Croatia, Georgia. Some of these are not in the EU, but it's the whole East European tendency. And you have Meloni in Italy, who went to Mar-a-Lago and came back with a clear mandate from Trump, to make her voice heard stronger. So there is a complete shift. So Macron, France being practically not relevant anymore because of the instability of the country. So Germany would be alone with whom? Only with the Baltic states. Now, how many people do they have? You can, count them on one hand. I'm joking, I'm exaggerating, but there are not many people. Then you have Poland and Scandinavia, and that's it. So that is not exactly an overwhelming force. And maybe that will cause some industrialists in Germany to change their view, because, the German economy is in a free fall. And the only way how Germany can survive is by orientating towards the global south. And that is a choice, which will become obvious. It's really the existence of Germany. So, things will not be settled with the election because we are in a complete tectonic change, of a period of 500 years coming to an end, which is colonialism.
Well, you mentioned earlier the North American Water and Power Alliance, which your husband strongly supported in many of his campaigns as a solution to the California fire crisis. We have two questions on that. One is, I almost fell out of my chair when I heard Trump say that water could be brought down from Canada to replenish water supplies in California. Do you think he knows about NWAPA? Once again, we see how far ahead of the curve Lyndon LaRouche was. And a second question from Michael D. in Los Angeles. What are the odds in his second term that Donald Trump will start thinking like Lyndon LaRouche?
Well, I think we will do all the work necessary to get there, because that would be the best for the United States. Seriously, one should reflect of the fact that, let me say this, because Lyndon LaRouche prophetically recognized the devastating consequences it would have when Nixon decoupled the dollar from the gold standard and replaced fixed exchange rates with flexible ones. And he said, if one continues on that road, meaning the maximization of profit, of liberal deregulation and all of the paradigm which goes along with it, that this would lead to a collapse of the economy, a depression, the new war danger, and new fascism, and the danger of a new world war, actually. Now, he updated that prognosis with 9 major prognoses throughout his political career, which all turned out to be absolutely true. I can only ask you, go to the websites of the LaRouche organization and the EIR Pub, which is, the EIR website for the publications, and look at some of the speeches Lyndon LaRouche made over the years. Some of them are that you fall off your chair because you think he spoke yesterday or today, addressing immediate issues. He was one of the most far-sighted persons in history ever. And I'm not saying that because I was married to him, but it's an objective fact. Now, it's the biggest tragedy that he was prosecuted. I mean, here you have a person who clearly had the intellect of a Leibniz, of a Plato, of one of the outstanding people where you have one in a century, if you are lucky. And the fact that the United States apparatus, what is generally called deep state, has been deployed against that man is the most tragic element of US history, because it was not just an injustice done to him, but it prevented the American people from recognizing the solutions he presented, from recognizing the analysis he presented, and all of this hardship which is happening right now could have been prevented, including the moral collapse of the population, the effect of the dope legalization, the effect of the violence in the schools, the effect of the suicide rates among youth, the collapse of the infrastructure in the cities, and what happened in Los Angeles. Because, as you hinted, if Navapa would have been implemented, there would have been no such fire. Or if there would have been a fire, there would have been enough water to extinguish the fire immediately. Now, I would be very surprised if Trump doesn't know about Navapa, because Navapa was a project which was very known, at least among engineers, and given the fact that Trump thinks of himself as a builder, I would be almost, it's almost unthinkable that he doesn't know about it. And this remark, maybe, if we campaign for it and if we make it an issue among scientists, among engineers, among city councils, among all the people who are affected by the devastation of this fire, that we can, create an environment where it is being implemented. I think that would be great. I mean, what is if Trump could be surrounded with a mood of people demanding the reconstruction of the United States, building a fast train system, connecting all the cities through a fast train system like that of the Chinese, or even better. The Chinese are now building, they have 45,000 kilometers. That's about 33,000 miles approximately of fast train going 350 kilometers per hour. They are now upgrading it to 400 or 450 kilometers per hour, and they're already working on a loop system with 1,000 kilometers per hour. Can the United States not just say these loopholes and these potholes in the highway system should end, and build a new highway system, build new cities? There is a whole effort to open up the western parts of the United States, which stopped at a certain point. So as a consequence, you have many states which are very thinly populated. You could build new cities, connect them with infrastructure, and it would really be the best for the American population, and everybody would have a perspective of learning, of having universities for young people to compete, becoming the world best again, which is not happening right now. So I think, if we really create conditions where the population demands it, maybe we can move it in this way. That is absolutely a goal which everybody should have.
I have just two quick points to make on NWAPA. One is that we have a video of NWAPA on the LaRouche organization website that's available for people to watch. Secondly, it's not insignificant that in 1968, Senator Robert F. Kennedy introduced a bill for NWAPA. RFK Jr. is now a close advisor to Trump. Maybe they have talked about it. Now we have one comment and then a question for you to close out our session today, Helga. The comment is from Diana from Canada, who says that she thinks that Trump has to put out the fires in Ukraine and Gaza as his first job, but then he can work on repairing and strengthening the United States again. And this would be the way to get global stability and peace for us all. Now, the question comes from Jocelyn Chakunte, who's the president of the African Diaspora International Trade Association. And she asked, how does Lynn's classical approach apply to the colonized states in Africa?
Well, I think the African countries right now are on the one side, naturally, there are still enormous dangers, terrorism, war, and so forth. But on the other side, there is an absolute determination by many leaders of African nations to modernize the African continent, to build up all the countries as middle class income countries. And, I think that, the attitude, for example, when President Ramaphosa participated in a financial conference in Paris about 2 years ago, he told all the Europeans who were there, I don't want to hear your sermons. You built the Inga Dam in Congo, which is about $80 billion, and then we can talk. I don't want to hear anything else. And that, I think, is the attitude many of the Africans have right now, because they are sick and tired that there are arrogant Westerners coming, preaching to them what they should do, human rights, democracy, rules-based order. And they basically, they don't believe this anymore, because they have seen that the rules-based order is something which can be bent in a minute to mean the opposite of what it meant before, if it suits the interest of whoever is talking about it. And, after the West condoning what is happening in Gaza, I think no leader in the global South will listen to anybody from the West anymore talking about human rights. That, I think, is a change which most people have not realized yet, but you will see in the future that what I'm saying is absolutely to the mark. So I think that, the best thing which could happen is not that the United States goes to Africa and tries to compete with the influence of China and Russia, which would again create tensions and factions and so forth, but take a cooperative approach. I mean, we have written a pamphlet, which you can also see on our websites, how to create 2 to 3 billion new productive jobs in the global South in the next decades. Africa will have 2.5 billion people by the year 2050. That's only 25 years away, one generation. That's not much. And that means, there will be approximately 1 billion people more. So when we say that we need 2 to 3 billion new productive jobs in that period, that is not a big number. That's just approximately adequate to the number of young people who will need a job. And that would be the only way to solve the migrant crisis, because, if you build, infrastructure, if you build industrialization, mechanization of agriculture, modern states, enough electricity, 600 million people in Africa still have no access to electricity. But to have that is the precondition for any industrialization. Now, if the West would join with the BRICS to build the kind of basic infrastructure, then, that problem can be solved, and the young people and older people who are now marching through the Sahel zone, through the Sahara, to then try to, go over the Mediterranean, many of them dying either in the Sahara, not being even reported about, or drowning in the Mediterranean, to then be received by a hostile Frontex organization of the European Union, who are trying to push people back, and there have been legal cases about that a lot. So rather than having that miserable perspective, which is ruining Europe and it's ruining Africa, likewise in the United States, the effort to push back the migrants to Central America equally does not function other than creating misery. But if there would be an effort of the collective West working with the BRICS Plus to solve this problem once and for all, create human conditions of economic development for everybody on the planet, we could solve all of these problems, and that is within reach. So, if you are in any part of the world and agree with this perspective, join us. Don't sit on the fence. Join the Schiller Institute. Come on Friday to the IPC meeting every week, and work with us. It's now a period of history where the individual intervention can change history. So please join us.
I think our viewers have a sense of that because we have more questions than we can take, more than we have time for. But in concluding, before we go, what can you tell us about the IPC meeting tomorrow, on Friday rather, at 11 a.m. Eastern Time?
I don't have the full list of speakers. I heard that Colonel Wilkerson will be on, then several spokesmen from the Middle East, Southwest Asia, because that is also now an extremely important conjunction. If the deal, which seems to be negotiated between the Israelis and the Palestinians, mediated by the United States, by Qatar, it's a very difficult moment, obviously. Still, there will be people reporting about what that looks like from the ground. So we will definitely discuss the post-Trump perspective for Ukraine and the Middle East and the overall strategic picture. So please come. This is the one place where you have every week important experts and specialists, discussing the actual strategic situation. And we have been told by many viewers that this is a format which really has no parallel. So it's the place to go.
Well, Helga, I'd also say there's no parallel for you. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you on Friday.
Till Friday.